and which concerns the way nature is depicted in picture books and how picture books can foster and support outdoor education, which is more his field. In particular, the research at the core of our paper here focuses on intelligent or agentive trees and the way their inner world is represented in picture books. Borrowing the daring assimilation between plants and persons made by Hall, we may say that we are interested in books which give shape to a tree's personhood, that is, which recognize plants as volitional, intelligent, relational, perceptive, and communicative beings. So our selection has first aimed at restricting the scope to books where trees are the supporting structures of the literary action, so not only a background, and finally focused on two picture books which were very similar in the opening phases of the story, but then radically diverged in their conclusions. We're not alone, of course, in our interest. Fabrice and I are part of a research group based in Norway, Bergen, at the Nature in Children's Literature and Culture, which last year has seen the issue of a book by Guanyo Loro and Duckworth's Plants in Children's and Young Adult Literature.
I'm sorry, I just have a question from the audience.
Yeah.
Yes, if it is started here.
He said the recording.
Sorry?
Okay, so see.
I'm sorry. It should be.
Sorry.
Okay.
Just want to make sure.
Editing.
1 minute.
Thank you. Oh yes. Over the last few years, however, critical plant studies have been enriched by the publication of other collections which focus on the relationship between the human and the vegetal world, such as The Green Thread, Dialogues with the Vegetal World by Vieira, Galliano, and Ryan, or Trees in Literature and the Arts, Human Arborea Perspective in the Anthropocene by Concilio and Fagione, just to quote the two most relevant. The plantain in the arts, however, springs from the plantain in science, which was heralded already in the 70s by Stone's Should Trees Have Standing, followed by Wilson's Biophilia, but which really set off in the new century when plants' intelligence and agency were posited by researchers such as Pollen, Travers, Hall, Marder, Mancuso, and many others. Question like Marder's, how does the world appear or not appear to a plant? What is its relation to its world? What does it strive to, direct itself toward, or intend? Are at the core of our interest in narrative and picture books, and at the core of the two works we're discussing today. What are the works we're discussing today? The first is Tristram Tree, The Tree That Wanted to Fly by Anthony Jarmo, 2016, which is Amazon self-publishing. So it can be easily inferred also from the pictures here that it is not only self-published, but it also appears totally homemade. From the drawings, the illustrator is the same author, and he had previously published novels, fantasy novels, so this is a first experience in picture books for him, to the way the text is merged or not merged with the drawings. And the second book is The Tree That Wants to Fly by Ramona Likinowski, 2022, Christian Faith Publishing. And here the publisher should immediately give a heads up as far as the final message of the story is concerned. In this case, the pictures and the total product seems slightly more refined and polished, but it is that there is a strong disconnection between the text and the illustrations, which appears as kind of an old-fashioned choice for a modern reader. There is only one double spread in which the text is superimposed to the picture, thus merging into it a little. But on all other spreads, the illustration is either on the verso direct and the text is on the facing page. So, since they do not seem to be particular excellence in quality, the natural, why did we choose them? And the answer is because of the way the story seemed similar to the point of plagiarism at the beginning, to then diverge in such a radical way. According to Travers, the difficulty humans have in recognizing plant intelligence and agency is merely a reflection of a sessile lifestyle. And indeed, this prejudice seems to be the starting point for both picture books. In these, the authors adopt what Holst calls a zoo-centric attitude, that is, a perspective that is biased towards animal life, and which is at the origin of the widespread plant blindness we're experiencing nowadays. So both books identify movement, specifically flight, deepest desire. In Jarmo, it is the contact with the birds who live and nest on the branches that kindles Tristram's desire. The young tree wonder whether this was what all trees feel when they learn that they can never really know the freedom of their feathery children, that they are trapped, rooted in one spot for their lives. And in a similar way, the tree protagonist of Kinowski's book envies the mobility of its animal friends. I listen to all your stories, your fun adventures, and hear of all the beautiful places you get to visit, but I am stuck here. I wish so badly that I could join you. Looking at the first picture book, we can notice that the tree is identified as an individual from the very beginning. It is given a name, Tristram, and as it grows, it experiences feelings which might seem specific of plant life. Its leaves kiss the rain, the sun gives it strength, the underground parts feel quiet and cozy, while those above ground are bright and roomy. However, the tree is also described in an anthropomorphic or zoomorphic way, try to convey the idea that, playful personality. So in winter, sometimes it wakes up to listen to the music of snowflakes touching upon it. Insects and fungi tickle it and make it giggle, so that an old tree nearby explains that insects can be harmful and that it isn't proper for trees to giggle. So we notice an effort of the author to convey a feeling of the environment which is not strictly dependent on the five senses of human beings, but at the same time, the final objective is to construct the character of the tree in such a way as to seem relatable for a child. Moreover, when it grows, it has children, flowers and fruit, which filled it with joy. And this fact allows us to interrupt the analysis of Tristram's story for a moment to focus our attention on the meaning that Jarmo attributes to the term children.
Who are the three children? If we recall the very title of this conference, the picture book between fiction and reality, we can try to verify the correctness of these two verbal propositions. If Tristram is a parent, are the flower its children? We think this is incorrect. If Tristram is a parent, are the fruit its children? Again, we think this is incorrect. So, if Tristram is a parent, who will be its children? The right answer is Sid. In this part, Jarmo seems to pay little attention to the scientific correctness of what he writes, despite highlighting that Tristram originates from a tiny nut, which botanically is a fruit, which dropped and nested in a warm soil, and subsequently something, botanically a seed, squeezes out until it becomes, after at last 10 years, a large tree. What kind of tree is the Tristram? In the textual part of this book, and the same will apply to Kinowski's, there are no terms belonging to scientific or common language, which could be useful for a systematic classification. So it's the reader who has to identify the species through graphic representation. At the end of the paper, we will explain why it's so important for us. Jarmo states that the Tristram comes from a walnut, and as a consequence, we conclude that it must be a Juglans regia. However, we have inserted a question mark because subsequent detailed illustration of the leaves, flower, and fruits appear inconsistent as we can verify by comparison with the field guide. In fact, in reality, the leaves of walnut are compound, and its flowers and fruits, when still on the tree, are both green. Instead, in Jarmo's drawings, the flowers are yellow and the fruits red, a further sign of the author's lack of attention toward the aspect of factuality.
And now we move to the other tree, Kinoski's tree. This tree doesn't have a name, but it is gender-coded as a female, in a way which strongly reminds Silverstein's The Given Tree. And as we will see later, this is not the only similarity between the two books. Kinoski's tree is described as already an adult. It is not an ordinary tree, but rather most a super tree. It is the most beautiful in the valley. Her branches are thick and strong, and her leaves are so tough that the biggest bugs or the most brutal storm couldn't touch her. At first, there is an attempt to convey sensations in a plant-like way, we could say. As the full season approached, she could feel the change of colors coming in all over her. But immediately afterwards, the author resorts to the sense of sight in the most traditional way. Although she was not very tall, she was just tall enough to see over the rolling hills. So what we may say by the initial descriptions of these trees is that they are mainly intended to work as correlatives of children's growth. And both stories are primarily concerned with two topics addressed in many works of children's literature: the value of friendship and self-realization.
What kind of phrase, Kinoski's? The answer is simple. We cannot tell it because the author does not provide any useful information. Her graphic style is poorly defined, and the illustration always portrays the tree in its entirety, as you can see on there. We only know that her leaves turn yellow in September, since the story seems to take place over a few days, from the onset of the autumnal season to the return of kids from holidays.
What we are clearly told instead is that friendship, or we could say interspecies relationships, are at the core of the development of both trees. The trees are shown as able to interact with the environment and of building up close interspecies relationships with their animal friends. Tristram loves the birds that live among its branches, and he loves the fact that they need it for shelter and food and exercise, and that without trees, birds simply could not be the beautiful creatures they are. In Kinoski, the tree communicates, she talks with the creatures of the valley, which she loves like a family. They would visit her every day and tell her of all the places they have been and all the wonderful things they have seen. And their dialogues are conveyed in direct speech, thus hypothesizing a voice for the tree. In Jarmo, there is no direct speech, but we know that they communicate as well because Tristram thought of the stories the birds told, we have said. The climax of both stories is reached with the attempt of the trees to uproot themselves, and they're an unavoidable failure, of course. For Tristram, it is a solitary decision, and the other animals are only involuntarily affected. Tristram tried with all its might to pull its roots from the ground and even flap its branches, leaves fluttering, squirrels scurrying, caterpillars scattering. In Kinoski, instead, the whole animal community takes part in the effort. If we dig hard enough around the roots, when the next strong wind comes in, we might just get her lifted out of the hair. And they are all disappointed by their failure. All the creatures looked at one another with sadness on their faces. Roots are described at this stage of both plots as something negative, something that ties the plants to the ground and impedes their freedom to move and attain their self-realization. Of course, trees can't fly, and Tristram cried. This is Jarmo, instead in Kinoski. I guess I'm not meant to see all those things right now. You could hear the disappointment in her voice. However, soon after the realization that roots forbid the tree's movement, comes the realization that roots can also be a tool, a resource for something different but positive. And at this stage, the conclusions of the two books diverge radically. I'm going to start with Kinoski, which, though it's the most recent, is also the one which has the most conservative message, and which is less factual in the way it tries to define the tree's feelings and priorities. In fact, immediately after the dejection of the failed attempt to liberate the tree, 4 children who live in a farm near the tree come back from their holidays, hugging her, climbing on her, and laughing. Her gloomy mood changed. She felt warmth and love instead. Her family had just returned from a vacation. So the mother tree has a sudden revelation. And then she realized why she couldn't leave. Her roots were too deeply grounded, and for a good reason. She had these beautiful children that she had watched grow, and they needed her. Now, roots come to represent the solidity and reliability of a mother tree that devotes herself to her human children with a sacrificial connotation that cannot but remind with strength silver-skinned trees. In Kinoski, again, we find they would spend hours playing with the leaving little scars on her bark. How could she ever uproot and leave them? It is possible to find similarities also with Bloom's The Flying Tree, teaching children the importance of home, in which the tree really manages to fly around the world thanks to a magic bird, and which invites children to appreciate their own home. There is no place like home. I don't want to be like the birds, it concludes. However, in Kinoski's case, the message is not only conservative, but also strongly anthropocentric, and perhaps also androcentric, with it suggesting that a tree source of happiness can be found in human children, and that the right place for a female tree is where she is needed. She knew that this place was her home. She had her human and furry family with her. She felt comfort in knowing she was right where she needed to be. Giacomo's conclusions instead are totally different, and in contrast with Kinoski, we could also talk about a biocentric, or even better, an ecocentric teaching. The roots here prove to be for Tristram an unexpected means of communication, and in a sort of way of transportation too. Indeed, the moment when Tristram's roots touch those of another tree, suddenly a message was passed from the other tree. In an instant, Tristram was aware of everything the other tree felt. Without getting specific, the Picturebook still manages to make us understand that this touching of roots refers to the way trees communicate by exchanging nutrients and other chemicals in the ground. And also the other tree's message. You understand, Tristram, asked the other tree. Now you will stretch over and through the earth in the way the birds never can. Evidently wants to refer to the mycorrhizae that create entire systems of interdependent and intercommunicating trees. So in this case, Tristram feels that he can travel all around the world. It seemed that all trees on the planet were touching roots, and Tristram became all trees. From that moment, Tristram was happy beyond dreams. Yes, Tristram was flying, at least. In this way, by abiding to much greater realism than Kinoski, Giacomo does not put the human being at the center of the narration. Actually, humans being are totally absent from it, and he does not even put animals at the center. No movement here. Plants are the real protagonists. They feel in the way plants feel and self-realize themselves in a way plants do, which is unique and does not depend on humans or animals, but on the web created by plants and trees. The story thus seems to encourage the readers to accept their unicity and find their realization in their own way, teaching them that there are different ways to get what they want, they desire, and that a community of peers can help.
We have reached the end of these 2 fictional picture books to discover that Jarmus and Kinoski's trees cannot properly fly. A slight sense of sadness remains. Fortunately, in nature, there are events that occur that imagination does not dare hypothesis. If we return to the reasoning about the tree's children, the seed, a new scenario opens up where the trees are capable of walking, swimming, and even flying. It is not a whim, it is not a desire, but a necessity to survive and colonize new territories. The seed children must move away from the adult tree. To achieve this object, different strategies have been established, including that on flying, as you can see. If you wish to delve deeper, the topic of anemochory, that is the dissemination of seed thanks to the wind, we have two important scientific texts to recommend to you. The first is The Tiny Seed by Eric Paul, 1970. And the second, the more recent, Sem Cementos que Quevoaram by Isabel Miñas Martins. And good reading.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting. Thank you.
Floor, yes.
I suppose that now we can do another presentation.